Welcome to Visualize, the podcast where collaboration fuels change. I'm your host, Chris Baker, and each week we'll explore incredible connections between nonprofits, businesses, and the community. This is a space where we highlight inspiring partnerships, uncover strategies for creating meaningful impact, and share stories that show how working together can make all the difference. Whether you're a nonprofit leader, a business owner, or someone just passionate about building connections, this podcast is for you. Welcome to a very special episode of Visualize. Today, we're going to actually dive into the state of nonprofits right here in Broward County and across the country. Our guest is Cathy Brown from the Community Foundation of Broward, one of the most trusted voices in local philanthropy and nonprofit leadership. Welcome to the show, Cathy.
Thanks so much. I appreciate being here, Chris. It's an honor and an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, we're going to have to take a deeper dive behind the scenes, really kind of like look at how we can help our nonprofits in this really interesting time. So my first question that I have for you is, how would you describe the current state of nonprofits here in Broward and across the country, actually?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. It is a challenging time for all of our nonprofits. And I think it's the uncertainty that really is driving so much of the fear.
Yeah.
And, but then if you really kind of look at the things that they're facing, right? I mean, across the country, we've got economic influences that are influencing everything from the way our donors are making decisions, as to whether or not they're going to make their gifts this year. To the way that our trusted foundations and corporate partners are making their giving decisions based on, economic influences and the rise and fall of the market and all of these kinds of things. So the economy is one big influence that is an unknown, over time, that is really driving a lot of the fear, concern, and even in some cases misinformation that the nonprofits are getting. Something else that is interesting, we saw we've talked about this before, but the increased need, certainly post-pandemic, very few nonprofits are seeing less need, more and more, and we know this is true in Broward. More and more are seeing more need for their services, and trying to figure out how to do more with either the same amount of money or even less money, and people and staff and resources to do the work. And in fact, what we saw in Florida is that 44% of Florida nonprofits have reported serving more needs just in this last year. So it's, we know that there's an increased need: housing, medical services, support services. So we've got an uncertain economy. We've got increased needs. Then we've got the government cuts, and all the things that are going on there. Another research study, I did a little homework to get ready for us today.
That's good.
And found that about 30% of the nonprofits across the country rely on government grants and government funding for at least a portion. And many of them were over half of their revenue. So were the, government grants to just completely cease, which is not the case. But if that were to be the case, kind of look at that worst case scenario.
Yeah, let's start there.
It could be $303 billion annually that is cut from nonprofit support, right?
Wow.
So it's a lot. So there's that sort of uncertainty in what's going to be cut and what isn't going to be cut. And, what are the executive orders and what's frozen and what's not frozen. There are so many things that are influencing, just the way that we're feeling anxious and concerned about the work that we're doing in the sector. That we've had some previous budget cuts that have been impacting this as well. Earlier this year, and even at the early last year, the arts and culture funding, cuts had come through. So we're seeing that right here in Broward. And then now looking both nationally and statewide at the 2026 fiscal year budgets, there's some pretty significant cuts that have been made. So all of that is really leading to a lot of uncertainty. And that's what I think is driving, that's sort of the state right now for me, the way that I would assess it. even to the tune that now we're seeing, because of all of this uncertainty, we're seeing drops in volunteer rates at the nonprofits. So not only are we dealing with, potential income drops and funding stopping or slowing and needs increasing, but now some of the ways that many of us are delivering services is also being impacted. So it feels bleak, especially when, this sort of all comes at you at one time.
Right.
Yeah. So it's feeling a little scary.
Well, this isn't the first time that nonprofits have had to go through this kind of a cycle.
Yes.
I remember having a conversation, I believe it was with you, about like right around the 2008.
Oh, yeah.
And how did that actually impact nonprofits at that time? Because, I mean, basically, that's 17 years ago. Is it just kind of another recycle of what the government shifted and how things...
Some of those kinds of things. Yeah, it's interesting. And if you go back in time, there are lots of these cycles that nonprofits go through. We had the 2008, recession.
Yeah.
But one of the things, I don't want to leave everybody in this bleak space.
No,
there are some really good things going on. But one of the things we saw even then is that giving dropped, but it didn't drop to zero. It dropped from previous levels across the country, but we were still in the billions of dollars in giving across the country to nonprofits and missions in need. So what we can kind of take from that, and the pandemic time, which we also saw some drop, but then also an increase because of the way that, everybody was sort of shared in this space at that time. This isn't the first time that we've faced some sort of a funding crisis, and it won't be the last. That's the other thing we've got to remember is that, that these are cycles, and there are things that nonprofits can do both in the short term and the long term to sort of navigate now and plan for the future. And we were having these conversations in 2008, and probably lots of instances even before that.
Sure.
And we were having them in 2020 with the pandemic. We'll have them today, and we'll continue to help nonprofits try to grow, learn from, take in, navigate the process, navigate where we're going, to be better positioned. Because as I said, this isn't the first, and as you alluded to too, it isn't the last.
No.
This will happen again in some form.
Well, and knowing that is kind of reassuring. And I'm hoping that's what we're trying to give to the nonprofits right now, is to reassure them, like, hey, this isn't the first time.
Right.
This is something that has happened before. Let's take a look at history and see what has happened. Maybe it's just a short-term dip and then it comes back.
Mm-hmm.
How does it relate that way? So basically giving us all that structure knowledge to go back to go, okay, this is just a reoccurring an event.
Right.
And we have to figure out through it.
Right.
One of the conversations that I've had recently is with two different nonprofits, one that was heavy relied on grants and one that's not. And the one that was not said, we're fine. Like there was no questions. There was like, yep, the budget's not changing. And I'm like, that's awesome to hear. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then the one that actually was relying mostly on the grants was like, all right, we have to disperse some of our resources to other nonprofits and kind of figure out how this is going to navigate. What's interesting about that is we need to shift that revenue cycle and that revenue for the nonprofit because we don't know the state of grants.
Right.
So what are some of those options?
Well, I like thinking about it this way. What is it that we don't want to rely on anything exclusively as a nonprofit? That's really easy to say and really hard to do.
Fair.
It is because there are so many things to do that if we know we can get a grant, that might be a shorter turnaround time, to get the funds to do the things we need to do. But what we do know is that individual giving is really the most stable type of giving for nonprofits to pursue. It is based on relationship development. It takes time and it takes resources to do. But in the long term, to the example that you gave, the organizations that have those individuals that they rely on, through annual gifts, through special gifts, through maybe even monthly giving, strategies like that, those can be really powerful. That's a really powerful group. And in fact, across the country, almost 70% of all giving comes from individual giving, regardless of what dip or, high point we're in on the economy. And that comes out of the Lilly School of Philanthropy's Giving USA program or research. But you can look back historically, and you can see that it is always at least 70% of giving is coming from individuals. And then in a recent study, this was somewhat of the good news that's coming out of a lot of this is going on. There was a recent donor confidence study that showed that of all the individual donors who gave last year, 91% of them, of those who were surveyed, plan on giving again this year. 91%.
91.
Right.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. So that almost gives you a minute to say, oh, this is great. Okay, wait a minute. I don't have to be in a deep panic.
Yeah.
And of that 91%, 76% said that they were going to give more in the next year, or that was their plan. So
wow.
Understanding and really investing in individual relationships for individual giving is one direction, that we really can start to look at. It isn't something that solves immediacy.
No, but long term.
But it really does. Yeah. It gives us some hope to say, okay, people still believe. And we saw examples of that even during the pandemic.
Yeah.
When, all the theaters had to shut down. So instead of, and there was some fallout from that, but instead of a lot of them having to just shut down, many of them, because they reached out to their donor base, their constituencies, their audiences, and told the powerful story of what was happening.
Yeah.
They were able to, increase the gifts that were coming in and the support that they were getting to be able to continue to pay the actors and support different types of programming. So one thing I think people need to really continue to think about and work on is that individual growth, that individual giving portion of their giving.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and individuals are also the ones that are making decisions on planned gifts over time, right? Whether it's at the end of life or it's just, there's some strategies that they can even make some significant planned gifts while people are living. So understanding and investigating more of those types of strategies are also important because, again, that's the largest portion of giving in the United States comes from individuals.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there are other strategies that organizations can think about as well. Looking at some of the more creative ways. I mean, we've talked about things like, there fee for service programs. Not everything has to be free for nonprofits. And there are many really cool nonprofits that do have fee for service or income streams from business aspect. You think of Goodwill, you think of, the other organizations like that just have those types of programs. And then there are some of the more creative ways to do it where, and I know you guys are launching a neat program that is going to be able to provide some ongoing revenue or recurring revenue for an organization. So this would be a good time to go in and tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you for the segue. Thank you. We're creating a charity TV show that we're splitting the proceeds at the back end from advertising and, syndication and other avenues that are coming back with the nonprofit. So after all the expenses are taken out, we're going to split 50-50 with that nonprofit. And it's an amazing opportunity to jump in and tell a deeper and richer story in a documentary style that will actually be viewed by over 400 million homes on 15 different streaming platforms. And so it's an amazing opportunity to really get your story out to the masses and hopefully have a whole new structure. So it is another revenue stream. It is another way. And I do really love the fact that we're actually able to do this, and cheers to the network that's partnering with us. I really thank you so much.
Yeah.
But this is just one option.
Right.
One of the other options that, we're talking about creative is I've actually talked to a lot of them that are creating courses that they can sell on a monthly basis to either help educate or to provide more information. Those are amazing opportunities for long-term growth.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we've been talking to nonprofits about specifically, like, here's another revenue stream. Let's create a course. We film it, we put it together, we put it on a platform, and then they can sell it to their constituents or to the community or wherever that they want as their target audience. Another creative is this. with
Yeah,
podcasts.
exactly.
It's exposure. We need, one of the things that we do here differently is we give the nonprofit a space for free to come on. We're looking for brand partnerships to keep the production going for season 3 and on. But right now, we are never planning to charge a nonprofit. We really want to make sure that they have visibility. And this is an amazing way to do that.
Yeah.
So
it really is. And I love that, because as we've talked before about the importance of storytelling, it has never been more important than it is right now. Right.
absolutely.
And so taking advantage of things like, a podcast, a video opportunity, the television show, to help get the story out, because our media consumption attention gets shorter.
Right.
The options get bigger. But when we can tell a good story, and all of our nonprofits have great stories, when we can tell those stories well, that really strengthens those individual relationships. We as funders love to see those video examples of stories and impact. That's something that we would take in as part of the reporting requirements on grantees.
Yeah.
So there are many different ways that really plays into, good, solid nonprofit work at any point, but particularly right now, when again, getting that story out is so important to help everyone really understand what the needs are, that what increases that they're seeing, and one thing I always have to caution our organizations about is that the story isn't that your funding has been cut and now you don't have the money to pay the staff or to provide the food or whatever it is that you do. That's the facts. There's no question that that's what happened. But the story has got to always tie back to the constituents, to the people that you serve, or whoever it is that you serve, and maybe furry friends too.
Yep.
But whoever it is that's being served, how are they impacted, right? And if we don't have the staff to do the work with them, then the end result is that those people don't get served. So the importance of that story really is tying back to the constituency. So that's a caution as we think about telling the story. And again, particularly now, that it isn't just that funding's cut, because that's just going to, if you're paying any attention to anything, you already know this. And if you're not, that's just going to be sort of where you tell them what that means to the people that you serve. That's the importance of the story. And I know you all help with building those types of stories in a really meaningful way so that that's easily seen and discerned.
Yeah, one of the biggest things when we actually talk and we're trying to help them understand is storytelling is really what's going to elevate your nonprofit. It's going to take it to the next level. It's the piece that actually connects to the donors, the sponsors, and the community. Now, a lot of the grants, they want those facts pieces, but that doesn't need to be in the video. That can be written down.
Yeah.
That video needs to inspire. It needs to have an emotional component. And you need to deeply connect with your target audience, whoever it is. It's the volunteer, it's the donor, it's the sponsor, it's the community you're serving. Whichever those pieces are, it needs to have that rich, impactful, emotional state.
Yeah.
And if you are, I'm going to say this right now, but if you are not understanding how that works, please reach out to us. We'll at least push you in the right direction. It is something that we love and we are passionate about to give back to nonprofits. We need to step up that storytelling aspect, not just facts.
Right.
Because if we focus all on the facts for the videos, the story gets lost and usually you lose the audience in the first 10 seconds. And we don't have a long time.
Right.
You need to capture them. You need to pull them in and go, what are they talking about? What are they doing? So yeah, it's very impactful.
Yeah, agreed. And again, now is the really important time to look at the stories that are already out on nonprofits' websites and out on their social media, and wherever else you're telling your story, and look at ways that you can strengthen those stories, and bring them into what's happening right now. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important piece. And I'm so thankful that you all are here to be able to do that kind of work, because you've done some workshops with us. It's been fantastic, just to even teach an organization how to storyboard, how to put the story together and those kinds of things. So yeah, taking advantage of those opportunities That's one really, really sound way to invest and support your future success as well as what's going on now.
Correct. Yeah. Take whatever resources you can right now. Either, utilize us for workshops so that we teach you how to do it, depending on where you're at the level, or we'll actually do it for you. It doesn't really matter to us as long as we're helping you succeed. That's the whole goal. Let's get you to the next step and the next step after that. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Visualize. We hope that the inspiration and practical insights can help you foster stronger connections and meaningful change. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, and leave us a review. To learn more about Visuals by Momo and how we support collaboration and storytelling, visit visualsbymomo.com. A huge thank you to everyone out there listening. Until next time, remember, collaboration fuels change, and your connections can inspire the world.